here in just a minute. Well, I'm actually showing 10:40 now, so I'll go ahead and get started. And like I said, anyone that joins late, you can either back this up or it will record. I think of this video set as unlisted, so it means anyone with a URL can watch it, but it won't be like show up in a search or something like that if you try to search for it on YouTube. So that's how this is set up. Anyway, to just kind of go ahead and get started here, like I said, we're looking at the visible satellite of Hurricane Laura, which was upgraded to a hurricane overnight. The little dots or little crosses you see down here are actually lightning strikes being picked up from the global lightning mapper on the satellite. But also up here you can actually see what's left of Tropical Storm Marco, this little swirl kind of south of Vermilion Bay there. So looking pretty good on the satellite this morning. The outflow is still a little impeded on the southwest side, but the outflow actually, it just in the last few hours, looks a lot better. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more intensification as it moves to the northwest. Here, as I said, the satellite presentation has really improved a lot, even just in like the last 6 hours or so. So going to that official Hurricane Center forecast, this is the tropical storm wind probabilities, which I actually prefer over the traditional cone product. Because it takes into account like the size of the storm. It takes into account the size of the storm, the confidence in the forecast, and so on. And so anyway, you can see pretty much in all of southwest Louisiana, in fact, even much of western Louisiana for that matter, is under the gun. And to answer the question in chat, yes, you can share this with like relative stuff. I mean, I wouldn't pass it around to like the whole world or something, but yeah, but also you can see eastern, southeast Texas down around Houston as well there. So still kind of a similar picture what we've been looking at the last couple of days. And then here's your hurricane wind speed probabilities, really painting the kind of mouth of the Sabine, Lake Charles, maybe a little west of Lafayette, between Lafayette and Houston there for that. And then, of course, the all-important timing. I use this time of arrival product here and use the most likely one. So we're looking at the tropical storm force winds probably arriving like Wednesday evening. It looks like along the Louisiana coast. It has slowed down a little bit in the forecast. It doesn't look like this is going to be like a Harvey type situation or it slows to like a total stall or anything, but it does slow down and it actually should start accelerating again after landfall. So a little slower. You might even have time to do some last minute preparations Wednesday morning, it looks like, with things not really starting to go downhill till later in the evening there. Similar story for Houston, probably looking late Wednesday before things start getting a little rowdy outside. So that's just kind of a look at the official forecast. Going on to, I'll have a few of the forecast models up here just so you can kind of see what they look like. And they're in better agreement now. So this is starting with the GFS model, looking at sea level pressure and wind. The wind is in knots here. As a good rule of thumb, usually add like 5 to 10 to whatever the number is to get the miles per hour, to give you an idea. So this is the GFS forecast right here. Landfall kind of somewhere between Cameron and Sabine Pass, right there at the Louisiana-Texas border. Very similar to Hurricane Rita in terms of the path and intensity for that matter. 957 millibars at landfall. That would probably be a Category 3 hurricane or so. They're certainly a fairly intense hurricane. Trying to see some of the winds in here, 80 knots. There's 93 knots in there. Which would be a Category 2, I guess. So Cat 2, Cat 3, kind of right around that threshold. Category 3 starts at 100 knots. That's 110 miles per hour. Let's put that in perspective. And the timing on this, by the way, this is around midnight Thursday morning, 1 a.m. 6Z is 1 a.m. Thursday. And then it takes it inland. Right here we're showing, and this is sustained winds, so it may not look as impressive, 33 knots, that's about 40 mile per hour sustained winds, but you'd probably be looking at gusts with that of, 50, 55, even up to 60 miles an hour in the Lafayette area, if this forecast verified. So that's actually pretty similar to what Lafayette saw for Hurricane Rita in 2005, which if you remember that, while it certainly wasn't an end of the world type scenario, it was certainly enough to blow over some trees, knock out some power, blew the fence over, all that. So definitely enough where you'd want to have everything, secured and batten down the hatches. And also, it's important to notice, these stronger winds here, they get pretty close to Lafayette. I mean, this is over in Jefferson Davis, Acadia parishes here. So, if we did have a slight eastward wobble in the track, it would get it a lot closer to Lafayette. So, well, we're not looking at some, doomsday scenario for Lafayette, it looks like, or anything like that. It's close enough where you're going to want to have your preparations in place for at least, I'd say your reasonable worst case scenario, probably looking at lower end hurricane conditions, certainly possible for Lafayette. Switching over to the European model here, this is kind of what we're looking like. Similar thing, a little more to the west though, in the European model. And this is 941 millibars. Notice it's even stronger than the GFS was on there, which is interesting. It usually seems like the European model is the more conservative one. And it's showing winds here 110 knots or so, which that's actually not well into Category 3, almost knocking at the door of Category 4, especially with the 941 pressure on there. One thing to note about these kind of models, like the European and GFS, these aren't particularly high resolution models, so it actually may not get the strongest winds in the storm, though it could resolve the pressure pretty well. So this could be a high-end Cat 3, Cat 4 heading right for the Galveston area. Obviously, with this track, it keeps Lafayette pretty minimal in terms of impacts. It'd probably just be kind of breezy with a good bit of rain because you're still on that right side of it. This is a track I would say actually pretty similar to something like Hurricane Ike in 2008, going just to the east of Houston right there, and then actually up through the Piney Hills of Texas here. Interestingly, it has tropical storm force winds in my forecast area up here in around Palestine. So that's what the European model looks like. You hear sometimes that, the European model is better than the GFS. In general, yes, but they're both very reliable models. So if we wanted to go somewhere in between them, if you remember, the GFS was kind of around Cameron right here. Here's where the European model is. So if you split that difference, you're right around the mouth of the Sabine River, which would probably still put Lafayette in kind of tropical storm conditions, maybe a few wind gusts up to around or even a little over 60 miles per hour with that, which again is similar to what Lafayette had for Rita in 2005. One thing that's cool is this is actually now getting into the range of the high resolution models. This one is the high resolution rapid refresh model, and it doesn't quite make it to landfall. This model only runs out 36 hours, but you can see right here off the coast of Louisiana, it has it at 965, probably a Category 2 hurricane. And these high resolution models are cool because they give you a sense of kind of what the structure of the storm looks like, because they have these simulated radar products here. You might see these on the Weather Channel and on. So there you can see this would probably be a little more filled in than this model is depicting here. It'd probably be a little more rain bands than this. But you get the idea. You got the big eye wall right here on the east side of the storm, the rain bands out on the east side with it a little more open on the west side, which is a pretty traditional structure for a hurricane. The good news is this model will run through landfall when they run it again, I believe, at 18Z, which is 1 p.m. Every 6 hours, they run this model out 36 hours. Jack's telling me a webcam's blocking the image there. See if I can move this a little bit. Bear with me. I'll move myself over here. How about that? But anyway, so that's what that looks like. This is my first time in this live stream thing, so bear with me. But that's what it looks like on the higher resolution model. Here's another one, which is actually a little bit hilarious. So this is the NAM model, which tends to be extremely aggressive. In fact, that would be almost a record-setting storm if that verified right there. I mean, that would be like a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane easy. So take this with an enormous grain of salt. This is This model is generally not one that we use for looking at hurricane forecasts, but what we do like to use it for is it's another one of the high resolution models where you can kind of get an idea of what the structure of the storm looks like. You'd probably have a little bit more rain bands out over here than this depicts, but you can see that very intense inner core kind of tracking Cameron up through the Lake Charles area and kind of up the Sabine River like that. So that's what these models are more useful for. I wouldn't use them as gospel at all for like the intensity of the hurricane, but using them just to kind of get an idea of like what the rain bands might look like and all at landfall. And then finally, using that same model, it does this peak wind gust product here. I can go out in time, and you can see for Lafayette, it does show some peak wind gust on the order of about 50 knots. It's about 60 miles per hour or so. So again, just to drive home the point, looks similar to kind of like what Lafayette saw for Hurricane Rita. So Hurricane Rita is probably a fair estimate. Obviously worse if it tracks a little closer to Lafayette, maybe not quite as bad if it tracks a little further away. But that's kind of what we're looking like. So just to get to wrap up, to get to some weather service products here, this is what the folks over in Lake Charles are forecasting for winds. And notice they're saying potential for, so the way this product works is this is kind of what they're saying is maybe the higher end scenario, kind of like what you should be preparing for. And they're saying 53 to 73 miles an hour, so they're saying prepare for kind of a higher end tropical storm. But notice that where you start getting in those hurricane force conditions is just west of Lafayette. So again, Category 1 hurricane conditions are not out of the question for Lafayette. And then looking at storm surge, not really a problem for Lafayette, but if you go to the coast right there, Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia parishes, more of an issue. That's why you're probably going to start hearing of more evacuations out on the coast today. Flooding rain. I'll pull up the forecast rainfall amounts in just a moment, but not a huge rainmaker. I mean, no more than any hurricane is going to produce a good bit of rain with it, but this isn't looking like a Harvey or Tropical Storm Allison or something like that where you just get like feet of rain. This isn't looking like one of those. It'll make landfall, and as you saw in those model depictions, it moves it out within a day or so. For that, so I'm not terribly concerned about rain. And then tornado threat, you do have a few tornadoes on the east side of it, though that actually might be a greater concern over towards the Baton Rouge and New Orleans areas. That tends to be more in the periphery of the storm than kind of in the core of it. So if you're over towards Baton Rouge, New Orleans, that's where I'd probably be a little more concerned about the tornado potential. And it's a text product here, but this is just a text of the tropical storm warning for Lafayette Parish. See, they're currently saying 25 to 35 with gusts to 55. Again, very similar to Hurricane Rita. But notice what they're saying here, potential for 74 to 110. I don't think it would be near that. It'd be closer to the 74. But what they're getting at is based on the track and intensity, uncertainty, prepare for, equivalent of Category 1 or Category 2 hurricane conditions. That's what they're saying there. For rainfall amounts, additional rainfall of 3 to 6 inches, but locally higher amounts. That sounds, again, like I said, I don't think this is going to be a major rainmaker in terms of a hurricane. I mean, all hurricanes are going to produce some rain, obviously, but it didn't look like it's going to be anything tremendous. And then just to finally pull up the actual map of the rainfall so you can see it. This is the latest graphical forecast for rainfall. So near and to the east, immediate east of where the center makes landfall, they're showing 6 to 10 inches, and it tapers off towards like 4 to 6 towards Lafayette, and then 2 to 4 as you head towards Baton Rouge and New Orleans there. And, this is kind of think of this as like if you're in this area, the average would be in that 6 to 10 range, but there's going to probably be little pockets within that little spots that get more than that. If you get a big band that goes over one area repeatedly, you could start running up into these higher amounts. But area average, you'd be looking at what you see on this map here. So that's all I had prepared. Are there any questions? I guess I didn't talk a whole lot about Houston. Much. Houston is right now forecast to be on the west side of the storm, so that's why it's only showing the 2 to 4 inches. And if you saw in those model depictions, the wind for Houston didn't look too bad. Again, because it's on the west side, which tends to be more open with less thunderstorm activity on it compared to the east side. But we will have to watch for any wobbles in the track for sure. Here's that wind threat graphic, and in fact, they are showing the hurricane force winds potential creeping into Houston with the really high winds. You know, there's potential for major hurricane conditions around the Beaumont Lake Charles area. So if we started getting a more significant westward shift in the track, that could put Houston in the more, you know, severe conditions here. So look, I'm thinking right now Lake Charles is probably going to be the ground zero for this thing if it makes landfall at the Sabine River. Put it right in the right front eye wall right there. So I don't think Lafayette's going to get the worst of this, but like I said, still prepare for something similar to what we had for Hurricane Rita. And then Houston, it'll just depend on how far to the west the track keeps going. Right now, I'm not terribly concerned about Houston based on the current track, but if it wouldn't take much of a westward track for the concern to go up significantly for Houston. So anyway, that's all I had. I don't see any questions in the chat right there. As always, for those of you that know me, you can message me or whatever. But that's all I had. I'll probably do another one of these tomorrow morning. So thank you all for joining.